A huge welcome to the 15th annual Celebrating Women in Conservation Breakfast, hosted by Trust for Nature and Bush Heritage Australia. My name's Tiani Adamson. I'm a wildlife conservation biologist, science communicator and podcast host. So basically I'm a professional talking bullshit artist, maybe something like that. And first and foremost, like I said before, I'm a proud Kurraweg woman with deep connections to land, sea and sky, with my ancestry coming from Wyburn or Thursday Island in the Torres Strait. I'm super thrilled to be here with you all today. Many of you have attended this event in the past. Can you pop your hand up if you've been in this room before or in these rooms before? Amazing. Well done for our regulars. Good job. Are you coming back for the food or for the content or the people? Maybe a mix. You may have been expecting our wonderful CEOs from Bush Heritage and Trust for Nature, Rachel Lowry and Corinne Prosecki, here on stage. But never fear, like any good leader, they've delegated the role of MC this year to myself, and we'll hear from them shortly. To kick things off, and first and foremost, this always was and always will be Aboriginal land, and I'd love to introduce Auntie Annette, Wurundjeri Elder and Chair of the Victorian Traditional Owners Land Justice Group, who has kindly joined us this morning to welcome us to country. Thanks, Auntie.
Hi, I'm also the chair of Wurundjeri, the co-chair of the City of Yarra, and I gave a talk the other day about women directors, and I turned around and said, stuffed directors, we all want to be the chairs. Imagine if we had a female president in America at the moment, we wouldn't be heading into World War III. Thank you, Donald Trump. Was I allowed to say that? Anyway, I'm here to do the Welcome to Country, but I'm really excited because I actually started in conservation and land management in 1984. And when I started out, I was the only girl and there was all just men around, and including in the Aboriginal community. And I had a lot of fight with the boys because they kept saying, oh, you know, it's men's business. And I said, bullshit, you know, like, if it's men's business and I can't work, I'll sit at home and you give me a pay packet quite happily. But they all soon began to be quiet. I was also the first person to look at cultural burns over 30 years ago in a place called Lancefield, Mount William. And I turned grazing paddocks back into bushland. I also recognised global warming, and I set in datum points, and I measured the erosion on the coast from the west to the east. And I noticed around the Geelong and Port Arlington after a big storm and that, we'd only lose a metre. But back around on the other side, we could lose up to 6 metres of collapsing coastline, and that's when I realised that we could be in a bit of trouble. And sometimes I'd put a datum point in, and after a king tide and a severe storm, I'd go back around Mornington and Sunnyside and find that it was gone, that there was a total collapse. And that's when we started working on looking at underground drainages to take the water gullies and stuff like that away. So when these rains come down, that natural gullies weren't formed, therefore causing the erosion, but there was a different way of getting rid of the water. I could talk about land conservation for hours, and I learnt most of it off the old people. And I also went to school, and a lot of the first things I did with Parks Victoria. Because being a blackfella, we had no money, but PV did. So they did come in quite useful. You all would have heard of treaty, eh? Well, you know how we got treaty, don't you? AI, Aboriginal intelligence. It was through a woman too, Jill Gallagher. And I'm so happy today. Look, I look out and I see so many women out there. And it's just exciting to see women in the forefront when we were hidden in the kitchen. And the biggest part about treaty was truth-telling. You would have heard all about truth-telling, eh? But what people don't realise is the truth-telling we're telling is telling the story of women worldwide. In the 1970s, if you had a child and it was out of wedlock, if you were a non-Indigenous, you were sent off to a convent and you gave birth to that child and you come back without it. If you're Aboriginal, you went to a hospital and while you're under the anaesthetic, they got you to sign a bit of paper to take your baby. And you wouldn't realise you were doing it. Then go back a bit further than that, and women weren't allowed to drink in pubs. Aboriginal people weren't allowed to drink in pubs. Go back a bit further than that, and women weren't allowed to work. Aboriginal people weren't allowed to work. You know, so all these atrocities that happened to Aboriginal people happened to women. Only we stood up and fight for the rights of Aboriginal people. So we as women need to get up and fight for our rights, for equality in the workplace, for equal rights, because we still haven't got equal rights and we still haven't got equality in the workplace. Like today, and I've been everywhere I've been going, there's been heaps of women sitting around, but what people realise is we still haven't got that equality. We still haven't got that equity. I barrack for North Melbourne, the women's club. My mother barracked for... My grandmother was born on Corranderk in Hearsville, and when we migrated back out into country, we all went to North Melbourne. So my great-grandmother barracks for North Melbourne, my mother barracks for North Melbourne, and my mother was the first woman union rep in Victoria back in the 70s with a lady called Joan Kerner and Bob Hawke, and poor old Joan, Auntie Joan, they used her as an scapegoat. The men stuffed it up and put a woman in there to take the rap. But we all know how that is, eh, girls? We've got to stick together. Anyway, truth-telling is very important, but I'd love to see women talk about their truths and what happens to them in the workplace. And my mother fought for the rights of women and workers to today. Back in the old days when we worked in factories, and this is what Bridging the Gap's about, all the black fellas lived in Braybrook and Dandenong. Only the lower class people in the structure of our society lived in those areas, but there was no OH&S. If you worked on acid baths, at the end of the day they'd give you a little cup of milk to drink, you know, and thus you had a whole section of 70 to 90-year-old people now with emphysema, cancer, through the, you know, atrocities that happened to the lower class and Aboriginal people working in factories. So all these, and my mum fought for that, right? So we've got to realise that as girls we've got to stick together, because if we unite together as one, as the underdog, should be amazed at the power we'd have moving forward. I could talk on women's rights all day and tell you stories that make your hair curl, but I'm not here to do that. I'm here to do the welcome to country. And in the beginning, we all believe in a creator. Some people call him God. Some people call him Allah. We call him Bunjil, an eagle who flew out over a vast plain of nothing and created the world. From that world, he created nations. From those nations, countries. From those countries, people. And even if you don't believe in that story, you believe that we come from the land, we go back to the land, and we complete the cycle of life. And even if you're an evolutionist, take my son, he's an evolutionist. He's a 19-year-old boy. He's had his licence for a whole year, my godfather. And I'm a cub, cashed up black fella. And I've got a Land Rover, you know, one of them little flash cars at you know, but mine's only a 2019 model. I'd love a brand new one, maybe one day. But him, you know, when he goes out and he parks, he doesn't think he's parked until he hears a bang and puts another dint in the Land Rover. So all down the left side there's bang, 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 you know, more hits than the Beatles. I'm serious, you know. Any panel beaters? No, conservationists. But, you know, I was giving this talk once in a place called Castlemaine, and this gentleman got up to me and he said, hey, look, he said, I respect your dream time. He said, but I believe in Adam and Eve. And he said, you know they're white, don't you? And I said, but Wasn't Adam and Eve from the Middle East? They would have a bit of colour, eh? They're Middle Eastern. Then I thought, apples. There is no apples in the Middle East. There's only pomegranates or figs. So maybe it was a pomegranate. I thought, this guy's hitting up like meatloaf. 2 out of 3 ain't bad. But maybe he got the third thing right. Maybe Adam and Eve were white. Because if they'd have been black, they would have said, stuff the apple and ate the snake, and we wouldn't be in the shit we are today. Wirramjika, let's walk as one in the name of reconciliation for a better future for all Australians. And girls, keep them bloody honest. Thank you.
Thank you, Auntie Annette. You are brilliant, full of vibrancy and great humour, and thank you for welcoming us to this beautiful place. I also would like to extend my respects and acknowledge that we're here on Wurundjeri Woiwurrung, pay my respects to elders past and present, and also extend that to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander and First Nations people in this room. We stand on the shoulders as First Nations people of 2,500 generations of families before us. That's a lot of greats if you're going to talk about great-grandparents, and it's something that I think about almost every day. We come from a long lineage of people who have not just resisted and survived on this continent, but thrived and forged systems and science and farming and an understanding of this place that is filled with deep time and an incredible knowledge system. So I really want to pay homage to that and acknowledge the deep history of this land. This morning's event is a shout out and celebration of women's leadership, endeavours and importance within the conservation and environment space, and a means to acknowledge that a diversity of voices, expertise and contributions is required to protect our beautiful natural world. In recognition of this Sunday's International Women's Day, I'd like to ask you to imagine a gender equal world, a world that's free of bias, stereotypes and discrimination. Wouldn't that be nice? A world that's diverse and equitable and inclusive and recognises that when women thrive, we all rise, rather than seeing us as a threat. A world where difference is valued and celebrated. And I ask you to keep that vision in the front of your mind this morning while we network and connect and drink brilliant cups of coffee. And particularly in the context of the important work that we'll chat about this morning and in the global context that we're in right now as well. Here in Naarm, Melbourne, we're thrilled to be hosting 540 people again. That's all of you. Big claps to you again. Thanks for rocking up early. And I'd also like to welcome everybody who is Zooming in online. We have over 150 virtual viewers this year and 17 different groups hosting satellite events all around the country. We love being able to share this event with people in regional and remote areas and interstate. And if you are online, I'd like you to think about acknowledging the people, the lands of the people that you're Zooming or calling in from to pay those respects. So whether you're here in the room, in person, joining us while you're having a bite to eat, or maybe quickly grabbing a coffee in a keep cup, or getting your kids ready for school, or enjoying your breakfast with your colleagues, thank you so much for taking part in this wonderful morning. I'd also like to shout out to Ellen Sendell from Victorian Greens. Where are you, Ellen? She's in here somewhere. Thank you for being here this morning. And also to Cindy and Lee, our wonderful interpreters, who I always am just in awe of interpreters and all the work that they are doing, taking in so much information and reading the space and creating equitable places for us to live and learn and work in. A huge thank you to Megan, the Trust for Nature and Bush Heritage teams. This is a huge event and isn't an easy thing to put on. Now, I know that you're all probably really hungry and ready for more coffee, but we couldn't possibly go any further without hearing from our illustrious leaders of our host organisations. As Rachel Lowry, CEO at Bush Heritage, and Corinne Prosk, sorry for mispronouncing your surname, I must have been thinking about Prosecco, which is way too early for that, so I'm really sorry. I did actually confirm pronunciation, but it's funny where your mind goes when you see 500 people in front of you, sometimes you just blurt things out. So I'd like to invite wonderful Rachel and Corinne up to the stage and to play a couple of brief videos while they make their way so that you can learn a little bit about the amazing organisations that they lead.
Bush Heritage Australia works to heal and protect the bush now and for future generations. All life, including ours, depends on the natural world, from the smallest ant to the tallest tree. In 1991, our founders raised the funds to purchase 2 forest blocks and prevent them from being sold and logged. A dedicated community was born, and so too was our mission to heal and protect the bush. Today, our impact stretches across Australia. Through our network of reserves and partnerships, we restore habitats, protect wildlife, and build resilience across landscapes. Our people, including reserve managers, expert scientists, volunteers, and partners, are in the field every day, tackling our environment's most significant threats. We control invasive animal populations and weeds. We manage country for fire or flood. We are informed by the knowledge systems of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people and Western science, ensuring our conservation work is respectful, collaborative, and right way. We work with farmers to deliver practical solutions for people and nature at scale, working in partnership with a sector whose footprint covers more than half of Australia. Nature is facing unprecedented challenges. Bush Heritage delivers solutions powered by science that we need now more than ever. Together, we can ensure healthy country is protected forever. Our future depends on nature, and nature depends on us.
When I get up and go out in the morning, I look around and I think, my goodness, we are incredibly lucky to be living on a property like this. You just take for granted the fact that you're totally connected with nature. We decided we'd like to own a bush block we could run for conservation. So it's 145 hectares, but there's about 5 or 6 different vegetation types, a seasonal creek. We have a colony of endangered brown bandicoots. It's got extremely high biodiversity value, which makes it special and also very special to us.
I like the fact that it's next to the Grampians National Park. That's pretty special. By having this property, I'm able to have my own little section of nature and look after it.
Well, probably the single biggest thing we've done in terms of biodiversity on this property is to rehabilitate the wetland. And it's just mind-blowing to see the explosion of life that happens when you add water. So it now has, I think, 90 plus native species, most of them aquatic. So it's been extraordinarily satisfying to see that change. And it's just sort of got better and better. And it becomes really important then, when you're putting all this effort in, to think, who's going to do this when we're not around? You know, we don't want all our work to be reversed. And a Trust for Nature covenant's a good way of, going quite a long distance to ensuring the property is protected in perpetuity.
I wanted to protect our property with Trust for Nature because we had some special places here. So by putting a Trust for Nature covenant on, I felt that I could continue to protect it.
There's a real opportunity to encourage more landowners to put covenants on their land.
By us maintaining this property here and putting a covenant on it, there will be a special place in the future.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you again for coming here and joining us for this breakfast here at Naarm, Wurundjeri Woiwurrung country. I feel already like we've done it again. We've got a room filled with energy and connection and purpose, and I imagine that's why each year, 15 years in, we keep filling this room, because we all value that so much. So thank you for being a part of that. My day's already been made. Tiani, thank you for stepping in as MC. I've never been called illustrious before.
Or Prosecco.
I'm stoked, quite frankly. It's awesome, so thank you. I know Auntie Annette had to run. She has another appointment, but she did whisper to Corinne and I, and she said, "What do you reckon? Is this a kind of group that likes a laugh?" And we went, "You're in good hands here." So thank you for not making liars of us, because I think she was absolutely fabulous. I'm also just going to quickly thank those that are joining us online. We are just thrilled to see that the online attendance grows every year as well. I hope that you're also bringing that purpose, that energy, that connection to your breakfast wherever you are across not just Victoria, but actually Australia. I want to do a shout out quickly to the Conservation Ecology Centre. They do a breakfast every single year, and I just love that somewhere, right there in Apollo Bay, there's a group that look forward to this event. I also want to thank the Corangamite CMA, who are allowing my husband to not be at the event this morning so he can drop the kids off at school so I can be here. So thank you.
Thanks, Rachel. Now, unlike last year, we weren't able to bring our sons. My son was happy to stay in bed, but I hear Rachel's son was looking for a day off.
Yeah, he was like, "Can I come again? I've got maths." And I was like, "No, you're going to school."
Anyway, what a year. The last year's been extraordinary. Now, I've had many geek little moments, including spending some time with Clive, was it Clive? Sorry, name, who we saw in the video. But what was your favourite geek moment for this year?
I know what yours is. I want to steal it because I reckon it was mine
I
as
don't
well.
think that's fair.
The Aurora Australis we both absolutely geeked out over.
I sent you the photo though.
Yeah, but I put mine on LinkedIn, so it was official for me too. It was pretty amazing.
But what an absolute, the last year we've had some incredible Aurora Australis experiences, and those solar bursts just for me were this huge moment of how nature just makes the world magic. Sitting out there, I spent one night in Sale and then one night in Eden on the south coast of New South Wales. One night it was green and red, and the next it was blue. Now, how extraordinary. And I think it was really back to this is what matters, you know. Nature is so important, and you've got to savour all of those little geek little moments.
Yeah, and I think it's a good point. These breakfasts aren't just about celebrating equity at the table and equality. They're about celebrating nature. And I dare say everyone that's getting up early to come to a breakfast like this understands that that magic is absolutely worth celebrating. We often at these breakfasts do our utmost to really shine the spotlight on women in conservation working on the ground, those boots in the ground roles that are advancing research and such important work across our country. But today we're also doing our utmost to shine the spotlight on women who are leading investments that unlock funding for nature, women leading philanthropy that are helping achieve huge and incredible things through organisations like ours and others.
So I also want to thank ANZ, TBH Consultancy, Cassinia Environmental and Yarra Valley Water for helping bring today to us and for sponsoring this incredible event. Without you, we wouldn't all be in the room together and we wouldn't be able to tell these incredible stories.
I reckon you want to go with She Gives.
Okay, yes. So I'll let you hold it. This time last week, this amazing report got released called She Gives, and it is really about the power of women giving. And I think what I took out of it is we're going through this incredible journey at the moment of intergenerational wealth transfer, and that women are going to be at the centre of decision making in some of this. And what women clearly do, and this report articulates it, is it's grounded in care, responsibility and connection. And for nature, that's a great outcome given that philanthropy's traditionally been at about 2%. So my inspiration in this is that this will help nature for the future. I have to say, my mum passed away last year and I've grounded myself into this report, and I'll be leaving part of my future estate, as Mum said, make sure it counts for nature.
She did well, Corinne. Each year we also work to share stories of incredible women achieving incredible things. And recently, when Corinne and I caught up, we started talking about our conservation heroes again. And the first two names that we both put on the table this year, we realised both of those conservation heroes passed away in the last 6 months, and so they felt like absolutely the right stories to shine the spotlight on, because there are so many women that have come before us to make this sector greater and what it is today. The first, I believe, is known to all, and that is the great Dr. Jane Goodall. An absolute icon and a pioneer for her time, someone I had an incredible privilege over a number of times to meet personally, and we just couldn't let this breakfast go forward without recognising her contribution to her sector, this sector. Yeah, let's call it her sector. I'm happy with that, actually. In the 70s, she founded the Jane Goodall Institute to ensure that her vision and life's work continue to mobilise the collective power of individual action to save the natural world. From there, she developed Roots and Shoots program. Many of you will have heard about that program, and I would argue that her legacy will live on through that program and all the work that we do. Her advocacy, her wisdom, and her determination will continue to resonate through us all. And Corinne, you wanted to shout out your conservation hero also.
Totally. I have to say, I was a groupie for the Jane Goodall when she came out here and spoke. But at a local level, I really want to call out Dr. Barbara Baird. Now, Barbara Baird is a local hero. She was in the room here last year. She was a total conservation pioneer and one of these people who saw the optimism in a landscape that had only, I think, a couple of trees. She bought a property of 65 hectares and revegetated it over a period of 40 years. She got involved in the local community, and last weekend I was honoured enough to be invited by her family for her memorial to spread her ashes under her favourite tree, her thinking tree, where she said you could see all of the following rolling hills, and now you can't see anything because it's so dense in bush. It's an extraordinary legacy for someone to leave. And I think what was so touching is she put a covenant on it to protect it forever, and then she's letting us look after it forever. So people like that, you can make a big difference at the local level, and it's so important and inspiring to hear.
Yeah. Given we don't have Prosecco at the tables, we won't ask you to do a cheers, but if you don't mind, let's put our hands together for those two legends. Now, we considered leaving it there, but there's a living legend in this room that we believe this year of all years deserves a shout out as well. And when I put this name forward, Corinne went, must do. And you'll understand why in a moment's time. The person whose name I'm going to just shine the spotlight on for a brief moment, she'll probably tell me off afterwards, has led significant change over the last 20 years. I haven't counted exactly, but let's go with that. It's about that. Through her respective sector, and that is the zoos and aquarium sector. I had the great privilege of working with Dr. Jenny Gray for over a decade of that time, and I saw her transform not only an organisation, Zoos Victoria, as CEO, from one that was doing good work to one whose great work was so steeped in purpose that it was an organisation difficult to leave, because you felt every day the difference you were making with fighting extinction. A term coined under Jenny's leadership that was so much more than a mantra or a slogan, and there are species today that I, hand on heart, will tell you are here, persisting in our landscapes because of her leadership. Her leadership, however, didn't just stay here in Victoria. Nationally, we saw zoos and aquariums adopt that fighting extinction strategy and ways of doing business, And then the doors flung open at the World Association of Zoos and Aquaria, where Jenny stepped in to lead WAZA. And we started to see zoos and aquariums around the world deepen their purpose and their impact. But it's not just the impact on the ground that makes us good leaders, it's what we do to unblock those pathways for other leaders to follow. And I just want to say, once upon a time, before I'd had children, I had a conversation with Jenny Gray that unblocked a moment for me that I wonder what my career would look like now. I hadn't applied for the Director of Wildlife Conservation and Science role because I was having fertility issues and I just didn't know when I was going to become a mum, and I just didn't think it was appropriate to apply for such a big role when I could perhaps in a few months' time be asking to go on maternity leave. Jenny asked, "Why isn't your application in?" And I gave some lame excuse, because who wants to talk about fertility issues? Not a lot of fun, sorry. And brushed it off. She came into my office the day the applications were due and she closed the door and she said, "I don't get it. I think you'd be great at this role. If you don't want it, it's fine, but why isn't your application in there? I'm not even the one that'll decide. It'll be the board." So I told her why. And she said, stop. There are a lot of women that have come before you that have done some very heavy lifting, so you don't have to tell me that you are thinking about becoming a mother and that's why you're not applying for the job. If you want to become a mum, do that. You'll go on maternity leave and you'll come back. Don't let that be the reason you're not applying for the job. Spoiler alert, I got the job. And so this is a very personal shout out for me, because I wonder whether or not I'd even be standing here today as the illustrious leader of Bush Heritage Australia without having had the opportunity to work under a great leader like Jenny Gray. So please can you all thank Jenny for her contributions to our sector. Jenny, can you stand up please? Jenny heads off soon to the US. She's been poached from our shores to be the CEO of Monterey Bay Aquarium. I'm okay with that though, because I think she'll be the next president of the US and that gives me great hope.
I'm totally okay with that, and she's shared she's got a submarine and I want to have a go. So, to mark the 15th anniversary of this breakfast, Bush Heritage and Trust for Nature have joined forces to create the Bush Heritage and Trust for Nature Conservation Internship. This is a launchpad for early career impact. It will build practical on-ground conservation experience, expand professional networks, and immerse a rising scientist into a workplace. It's designed to be career-shaping and a tangible way of bringing people up through the ranks. I wish something like this had existed when I was at uni. I may not have done accounting. So this is, so super exciting. Over to you, Rachel, with the details.
Okay. We often ask for feedback. We always ask for feedback after these breakfasts. One of the things we've heard every single year is, we love your two organisations. We love the complementary approaches that you bring to our sector. What are some initiatives that we can back that actually benefits both of your orgs? And I think we've gone one greater by launching this internship, because we're not only going to say that both Bush Heritage and Trust for Nature benefit, emerging leaders will benefit. So by launching this internship today, can you imagine that? A paid internship where you get to learn from both organisations with these complementary skill sets. We are going to ask you to help and partner with us. This is where you come in. On every table and online, you'll see a QR code. Please consider helping us fund these internships, because we're not asking students at a time where they're not flush with cash to come and volunteer to get experience. It's just not a fair way to get your foot into the sector. These are paid internships, and we'd love to leave this room today having raised the first 30,000 to go and advertise the first joint internship across our two orgs. So let's see how we go. Let's see how many internships we can kick off together. One would be great, but I'm sure this is going to go from strength to strength over time. So let's keep moving things forward, just like Barbara, like Jane
and like Jenny have done. Thank you all for your generosity, your leadership, and in the belief of what's possible. Rachel and I really enjoy preparing for these breakfasts, and we really look forward to what happens next year.
Yep.
Enjoy your breakfast.
Thanks
Have
again for
fun.
coming, and we'll hear from Lisa Miller soon, talk about inspiration. Cheers.
So I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land in which we meet today, the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung people of the Kulin Nation, and pay my respects to their elders past and present. I spend most of my time personally in Lutruwita, Tasmania, on the lands of the Palawa, and they have been caring for that country for tens of thousands of years. And I want to pay my respects to their elders, past and present. I also want to pay my respects to Indigenous people around the world as the enduring stewards of lands, waters, seas, and culture. That continuity of stewardship across millennia here in Australia reminds us that caring for country is not a new idea. It is the original one. Bringing us to now. A few weeks ago, the Wedgetail team gathered in the mid-morning sun at a place called Stocker's Bottom on one of our lighthouse properties called The Coin in the Tasmanian Midlands. We didn't have our laptops or our mobile phones. Mine might have been in the car. We weren't sending emails or having online meetings. We just had branches, gloves, and conversations. What we were doing was building 2 small leaky weirs, hoping that when the rains come, they will help slow the water, spread it, and let it sink in to that landscape that had been cleared and drained in recent decades. A very tiny intervention in a 7,000 hectare property. And as I wove branches into place, I wondered about how the water might expand around that structure, how a frog might find shelter under the stones that we put at its base, how a bird might use it as a perch as it flew across that area. And would a devil potentially look at that night really weirdly and wonder who had built that? And it got me thinking about scale. This tiny intervention in a very small drainage channel, what does it mean? What does it mean for Stocker's Bottom? What does it mean for the catchment more broadly? What does it mean for Lutruwita, Tasmania, for Australia, for a planet accelerating towards its limits? For several generations, we've been living on the downward slope of this curve, taking more from nature than it can regenerate, externalising ecological cost in our economies, acting as though limits do not apply to us as a species. This is what ecological deficit looks like, and we can all feel it in our landscapes and seas and waters, in our communities, in our institutions, in our societies. And when you work in conservation, as so many of you do in this room and online, whether it's in a drainage channel or around a boardroom table or at your home office desk or in a lab or at a zoo, we can all feel this imbalance every day. But from here, the curve can bend in different directions. So the real question is, what determines the path we will take? I gave you a sneak peek there. The answer, we all know, isn't one project, one policy, one new idea, one technology, one new innovation. It's about changing the systems that produce the imbalance, and it's about systems change. This is not a problem to be patched. We are at the limits of many of our old human systems. And that means what's required is not an adjustment, but a transformation. Unfortunately, transformation is rarely neat or linear. It can feel like uncertainty, it can feel like disruption, it can feel like a total loss of control. But transformation can also feel like possibility, like innovation, and like the start of something new. And how we all interpret that tension individually and collectively together will determine whether we retreat into the past and the status quo, or we step forward into a regenerative future. Now, this transformation zone is where chaos and emergence meet. I'm sure you can all feel some chaos and emergence in our world at the moment. It's not at the end of something, but it's an unstable space where one system is breaking down and another is building up. To make sense of this overlap and to represent it visually here, at Wedgetower we've used this simple framework called the X-curve, and some of you might be familiar with it. It's developed by the Dutch Research Institute for Transitions. Here's a bit more of it. Now, the X-curve here isn't telling us which direction is good or bad. It's just showing how systems shift. So you can see here there's an established system. Let me see if I've got a laser pointer up here. And it's coming down and it's optimized and it's coming down this curve and it's starting to destabilize and it's descending down into chaos. Not because it's failed overnight. This might have been around for decades or centuries, but because the internal logic of the system has reached its limits. At the same time, something new is building up this curve here. It starts quietly in experimentation and gets confidence and accelerates up into this zone of emergence and then into transformation. If it does well in this zone of transformation, it will move through into institutionalization, stabilization, and it might become the new normal. We are living in this zone of transformation. And I would highlight, in moments like this, optimism is not about blind hope. It's a decision to look for the emerging patterns, not just what is breaking, even though our media cycle is very focused on what is breaking. Because transformation is not guaranteed. It can stall, it can fragment, and it can be captured by the old logic, and it can turn into this dotted line here and not come through. New patterns can emerge and still fail to become dominant. Now, we have already seen powerful upward curves building. The energy transition is one of them, and it's incredibly exciting. Energy transition systems are decarbonising, transport, homes and industry are electrifying, and at the same time you've probably noticed there's a few old extractive growth models that maybe are coming down this breakdown curve and destabilising. But I would put to you that if this upward curve remains just engineered and technological, without having an ecological component, our transformation will be incomplete. We could solve for carbon, and we could still lose the very living systems that make our planet habitable for all of us and all the species we live on this planet with. The next era cannot simply be just about decarbonisation. It must be regenerative at its core. And that means innovation not just in energy systems, even though we continue to need to do that. It's about how capital flows to ecosystems. If we in how we value the land, water and biodiversity, and how we back the people holding nature in place. This is the curve I care about. Not just innovation and decarbonisation and technology, but regeneration, the repair of our natural systems, the conservation of our natural systems. And this raises a deeper question that I'll probably bring up a few times today. Where do we all place ourselves on this curve? That question led us to create Wedgetail, a platform for placing capital deliberately behind regenerative models as they take shape, as they come up into this emergent zone. And when I look closely at the curve, I don't just see it here in theory, on a slide, I see it in people like Sandra. Sandra leads a group in Panama called Pro Eco Azuero, in a region where forest has been cleared in recent years for cattle grazing. She and her team have been working with more than 400 landowners to stitch together an 80-kilometre corridor across fragmented farmland. The goal is simple: allow species like the Azuero spider monkey to move safely between forest patches. But as you saw from that corridor diagram, this isn't mainly a national park, this is private farmland. So the work is not just ecological, it's relational. Sandra and her team sit at kitchen tables, they walk fence lines, they help landowners see how a corridor can improve their water, their soil, and their productivity and not threaten it. They've brought schools, the local ones, into their work so children plant trees where their families once cleared them. And conservation becomes part of how the next generation learns to think about the land through relationship and curriculum. They map progress, they move from one property to 5 to 15, from fragments until they have a connected corridor. No single intervention is dramatic, but together they're reshaping that landscape. And this is what that upward curve looks like in action. But work like Sandra's doesn't scale on goodwill alone. It requires capital that recognises regeneration as value creation and not risk. And this question, how do we align capital with stewardship, has shaped a lot of the work that we do at Wedgetail. And one way we've tried to answer this is through our nature-linked loans. Loans to people like Lauren. Lauren co-owns a farm called Felds in Tassie. She owns it with her husband Mike, and they met as chefs in London. And then they moved to Melbourne, and they were chefing in many high-end kitchens in both those places. And as they put it, they chased flavour. And then they realised that flavour was not created in a pan, according to their words. It begins in the soil. And once they understood this, they started asking different questions. Where does my food really come from? And who is stewarding the land underneath it? And that question brought them to farming and to Tassie. And they started growing organic vegetables on a tiny little block with hand tools, a wheelbarrow, and a broad fork. No inherited land, they leased it. No capital, just experimentation and growth. Leasing land allowed them to test ideas and build a business, which they've done. But it made their long-term stewardship thinking and ecological thinking difficult. So when they were finally ready to purchase their own property, they approached some of the big banks here in Australia and unfortunately were rejected. Not because their business was failing, it's profitable, but because the profile of the land they were buying didn't suit the conventional models, and the fact that they were first-gen farmers. They weren't proposing to clear and maximise production. What they wanted to do was farm the already cleared areas on the land and protect and restore the intact bushland and waterways on their property. Conventional finance has difficulty seeing the value in this currently. The system wasn't designed to reward regeneration. At Wedgetail, we were lucky enough to be introduced to Lauren and Mike through Sustainable Table and a group called Steward. And together we structured a nature-linked loan with them that rewarded their stewardship of the biodiversity of their block and their property alongside their farming practice. Basically what happens is the interest rate reduces as milestones are met. These milestones include improving the soil health and developing and delivering a plan to restore bushland and riparian areas as well as others. This is finance that recognises regeneration as value creation, not risk. So now they are building their farm where local food production and biodiversity strengthen each other and strengthen the community around them. Again, this is what the upward curve looks like in action. When I look across sectors, I see women are key in building this upward curve time and time again. Not just in Panama, not just in Tassie, but it's everyone here in this room. So I ask this question again, where do we place ourselves on that curve? As this is a question I've been asking myself in various ways since I was a little girl. I was one of those children that when asked from a very early age, what do you want to be when you grow up? I always said a vet or a zoologist. And I think you can see from the delight in my face there, just being in the vicinity of that kangaroo just brought total joy to my day. In 1989, after watching Gorillas in the Mist, I did a huge school project on mountain gorillas. Women like Diane Fossey and Jane Goodall showed me that conservation wasn't just something to admire, it was something that women could lead on. Thank you, Diane and Jane. I did do work experience at a veterinary clinic, and I actually worked there for many years, funding myself through part of my uni. But I realised I was less interested in treating people's pets than I was in understanding the systems that we all lived in as animals. And so I went and studied zoology at the University of New South Wales. That decision to consciously invest my time and my HECS debt, as many of you has done, in supporting the health and survival of animals and ecosystems was much more than thinking just about my career. It was about what contribution I could make. So I went on and I studied honours. I did sexual selection at the evolutionary biology lab with Rob Brooks at UNSW, and I worked on guppies, hence why they're on the screen. I did resource allocation in male guppies across their lifetime, and I had a wonderful time, and that was a wonderful lab. It was, in fact, when Rob started building his lab, I was his first student, and that very same year, someone else started at UNSW. Her name was Emma Johnson. Emma came into that building and started building her marine biology lab. And as a female student, her energy ripped through that building. There weren't many leaders in the biological sciences at that time who were women. And seeing her build that lab with such energy, and also know she wanted to build a family, was an inspiration for me. It showed so many women there and beyond in the years that she worked that academia could be for them as well. And that mattered to me. Thank you, Emma. I went on to work at the Australian Museum, which I was incredibly fortunate to be mentored there by many scientists, but also people working in different areas like communications and technology. Anne Skates, who was head of Search and Discover and the web team at that time, encouraged me, much like Rach talked to about Jenny, to push beyond what I thought was possible for me. And that nudge led me into the world of technology. Over the next decade, I led tech teams across agencies, media organisations and startups. And in those years, I met my husband, Cameron. We not only married, but we navigated risk and impact together. And we built a family. Eventually, our path together led to Canva. Canva was and is a masterclass in what the upward curve looks like and feels like. It didn't grow in one big leap. It grew because of thousands of small, well-placed actions that compounded over time towards a powerful vision. It grew because people in that team believed something different was possible and built towards it. And it grew because diverse, connected teams working across disciplines, marketing, engineering, product, operations, all strengthened the product and the system together. And it grew because momentum ladders. You don't jump to the summit or the moon. You move from milestone to milestone, building capability and strength as you go. That's really important to build those things as you go. These lessons at Canva and across my career stayed with me, and I wanted to reiterate just a couple of them here. First, imagination shapes what's possible. We are in a battle of imagination in our societies at the moment. If you can't see a different future, you won't build it. Secondly, diverse, connected teams build more resilient systems. A lot of you in this room are ecologists. You know this is true in ecosystems. The same thing happens in organisations. Diversity and relationships matter. And third, building something new doesn't happen in a single leap. It happens step by step as we build towards something bigger. So if I understood these lessons, in 2019 I began asking if I also understood how incentives shape systems and how capital accelerates curves. And I also was really clear on the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change reports that year that connected what was happening in the biodiversity and climate crisis. Then where was my responsibility? Where would I step in and step up? And that question, as I said earlier, led to Wedgetail. Wedgetail, as I mentioned, it was designed to place capital on the upward curve. We use grants, loans and equity deliberately as levers within a much larger system. Levers to strengthen regenerative systems, to back people conserving and restoring ecosystems, to support sustainable use and adaptation, to experiment with nature-linked finance. Because where capital flows determines which curve will accelerate. Now, we don't just allocate capital, we also steward some land ourselves on our lighthouse properties, as you saw when we were building some leaky weirs. We want to learn through doing. This is because stewardship demands staying power. It requires commitments to outcomes you may never see. You need to think beyond your own tenure, beyond funding cycles, beyond election cycles. It stretches beyond human lifetimes. And working with that land ourselves gives us something essential for us to do all the other work we do: humility. It reminds us how hard this work is, and it deepens our respect for stewards of all types that we work with around the world. Now, we're definitely still learning as a team, and a few of you are probably sitting with our team around the room. One of our core values is forever learning, but one of our core beliefs is also pretty simple, and that is, if stewardship is what enables ecosystems, then finance must support the people doing it. And stewardship, as we all know in this room, takes many forms. It exists wherever someone takes responsibility for the integrity of the systems they shape, because that is how the upward regenerative curve is built. And that brings me back to this room and Australia more broadly. In Australia, we have all the capabilities and ingredients. We are one of the world's mega diverse countries. We have the oldest continuous living culture and land management knowledge. We have world-class science. We have pools of capital. We have relative political stability. And we still have landscapes of scale, from reefs to rangelands that remain globally significant, even under immense pressure. The capabilities and the ingredients are here. The question is, can we align them towards regeneration? We know that this alignment will require people, as it won't happen on its own. People who carry this cultural knowledge, people who conserve and restore biodiversity, who translate and generate scientific knowledge, who manage our productive landscapes, as was mentioned earlier, who design better finance, who shape governance, policy and law, and who lead our organisations and our communities, and who teach the next generations. Now, it would be amiss if I didn't also say those people right now are doing this work inside an economy that is rapidly transforming. Australia is not only shaped by land and ecology, we're also a knowledge economy. And like the rest of the world, we're entering a period of profound technological acceleration. Artificial intelligence is reshaping how we create value. Many of our routine and analytical tasks are going to become automated and are becoming automated. Entire sectors are changing right before our eyes. Just look at what's happening in the technology sector right now. And that raises deeper questions for all of us. What is work? What creates value? What makes us human? If knowledge becomes abundant, if analysis becomes automated, if routine cognitive work is no longer scarce, then something else becomes more valuable. Things like relational intelligence, ethical judgment and care, place-based knowledge, long horizon thinking. These are not soft skills. These are system stabilising capabilities. Because as digital systems accelerate, biological systems will not. Soil still needs to regenerate slowly. Water cycles still depend on our forests. And humans, as part of nature, require connection to place, to purpose, and to each other. Stewardship is how these capabilities I just listed can start to be applied in the real world. Stewardship draws on this deep knowledge of place. Trust and relational intelligence is part of it. The long horizon thinking, and this is really important, it holds complexity without collapsing into it. This is not nostalgic work, this is future-proof work. And when I look around the country, I see many women, many in this room and online, already carrying these capabilities. In a time of technological acceleration, that kind of intelligence doesn't diminish. It becomes even more essential. If stewardship builds the upward curve, we need to invest in it. In corridor builders like Sandra, in new landholders like Lauren, in the next generation watching us, and in leaders who carry the work forward, the work of Diane, Jane, and Emma. It's in rangers, in scientists, in teachers, in lawyers, in politicians, in finance teams, designing new models to bend the curve. Because regeneration is not a single role, it's an ecosystem of roles. And Australia has the opportunity to lead, not just in decarbonisation and renewable energy, but in regeneration. The opportunity is real, but regenerative tipping points will not arrive by accident. They are built when enough of us choose to bend the curve. Change won't move through ideas alone. It moves through people who take responsibility where they are. Across this country, women, as I said, so many of you in this room are already shaping this upward curve. But I would say to you, we're not quite yet over the tipping point. We are not through that zone of transformation yet. The regenerative curve will not dominate unless we strengthen it. This is our moment to not cling to what is breaking, but to build what is emerging, to push together until the upward curve becomes irreversible and not a dotted line. The future will not transform on its own. It will transform because all of us together choose to build it. Thank you.
The top question that I want to ask, and thank you all for your time, knowledge and wisdom and your commitment to conservation and also to empowering women. It's something that you all do really well that I acknowledge and look up to massively, so thanks for all the work that you do. There's a great question in here about your regeneration curve, and it says, how do we enable government to join in on the regeneration curve?
Oh, it's a big question. I think, and there's probably people in this room today, I would think, from government. So I feel like government is here and it's participating, but I think that there's a lot of thinking for us as a sector to come together and strategise to also keep taking to government in terms of how do they invest in nature, how do they invest in these spaces. And I was very fortunate last year, when was it? End of last year, to have a dinner. I was actually invited by the Invasive Species Council to have a dinner with Jim Chalmers and others. And one of the things that he did speak about was their desire, and we can all discuss this, to invest in more things, but better understanding strategically the impact of those things and how to do it well and how things connected together. And I think that that was one of the things that was confusing for government and probably in some ways confusing for all people investing in the sector. How do you not just do vertical drops of money, but how do you do that in strategic ways that enable the system's change? And so I think government are also wanting to and looking to do this stuff, but they also need, I guess, more strategic thinking and approach from us in terms of how we're doing it.
And I would probably add to that, I had the opportunity, maybe about a decade ago, I was invited to be an advisor to the Threatened Species Commissioner. And it was really awesome 3 years doing that to the side of my day job because I got invited in on a lot of meetings. And one of the things that I realised is that it's often not easy to actually open the door and get in front of the decision makers within the government system. But then when you do, there sometimes can be a lean or a propensity to really just share all the problems that are frustrating us, and you can understand why. But those meetings that I saw that were often led to impact were ones that also invite government to be part of the solution, not just sort of say this is the problem and fix it because you're the governing body of the day, so damn well fix it. And no, I catch myself out from time to time just wanting to say that. But inviting solutions that you can co-design together, but also understanding sometimes that timing can be everything. It's not always an easy context to work in government systems, based on the leader and the values of the leader in charge, based on the economy, based on where the political cycle's at. So the other thing I would say is if you are working with government and your incredible idea to turn that curve and get those incremental steps going doesn't get up, keep trying, because timing really can. I have put things to government 4 or 5 times and I'm sure they see me coming going, here she is again. And then all of a sudden it's the right moment in the political cycle or the right funding has dropped and they go, yes. And so I would just say persistence, build the relationship through a solution-focused lens and get the timing.
Awesome, thank you. Did you want to add anything? Beautiful.
Been said.
Question number 2. No. Is there an age limit or any other requirements that we have for the internship between Bush Heritage and Trust for Nature?
I'm not sure. It's. We are looking at emerging conservationists, but I don't know if we have an age limit. We can come back on that. Someone in our beautiful HR teams will know what the eligibility criteria are, but my sense is it's pretty flexible.
Pretty flexible and recent graduates, for example, but the Seeding the Future program is who will run it through, so they'll have an even better answer than whatever we just gave.
And I'll just add on the internship, because it connects very much with what I spoke about today about investing in future leaders, investing in nature stewardship. And so Wedgetail has decided to sponsor the first internship in the hall to support other women coming up through the system.
Woohoo! Thank you, Lisa. Lisa did share that with us prior, and I'm buzzing. 1 internship already on the go. 2, thank you. Oh, Lisa's also, Lisa and Simon, thank you very much as well. We're off and running. Can I just say, Tiani, we had a strategic session 2 days ago, and our head of HR, Mel, read out a post that an intern for Bush Heritage had put on LinkedIn. These internships can change lives. They can accelerate careers. They mean a great deal to people. So, again, thank you.
Thanks so much. How might we bring a genuine focus on regeneration into news and media to break through short cycles and create both urgency and hope?
It's stories. We've got to keep telling all those stories. Stories about nature, but also stories about people. People making those incremental little changes, making those big changes. I think that's the best part of my job, is hearing and meeting those people. People like Dr. Barbara Baird, inspiration. And she inspired so many people. At her memorial, there was over 60 people who've been changed by what she did just directly. Just keep telling the stories and speak up.
I'm going to let Lisa as well field this, because I think the science comms that's coming out of Wedgetail is disruptive, innovative, but in a way that's positive and it's worth watching. And I know you're all giving this a lot of thought.
We are, and we've got our storytelling lead in the room here. Bronte is with us. We think about this a lot. I think when I spoke before and I was talking about the downward breakdown curve, and I think that it's partly, like, I'm an evolutionary biologist, we've got these things wired in us around what we draw attention to, and the media cycle also know this, and we know that you're attracted to tragedy and all these things that are happening. And so I think it's around really thinking about these stories that we tell about nature. And obviously we all want to hear positive stories, but we have to really crack this nut on storytelling that enables these stories. Like, there's incredible stories. If we think about 2025 and reflect on it, I'm sure there's a huge number of stories that you can think about that just dominated the news cycle, when there's so many incredible stories of in human society and developments in medicine and nature and other things that just weren't being told. And so how you reflect on 2025 and what you think of it as a year is really warped, and it can become part of the just talking about politicians and ones in the US and who was assassinated and all these sort of things. And so I think we've got to really think about how do we crack this nut around storytelling and attracting the attention and drawing people back to these type of stories. And I wouldn't say it's something that Bronte is thinking about every day and we're trying to think about every day. And I think as a group, I know the Nature Media Centre's started.
I was just going to say that next. Yeah.
Monga Bay is coming to Australia as well, I think. And so I think that collaboratively as a room, we still need to figure this out, and I don't think we have all the answers, but definitely getting more attention in the media and it to be more part of the cycle is what we need.
And I was just going to say the Biodiversity Council, I'll give a plug for them, they're really applying their minds at the moment to how we can start cracking this code. We've got to get these stories out there that uplift and inspire, but balance with the pragmatism. We don't want to give false hope. We want stories that move people. And so Sarah Beckersey's in the room, someone to chat to. and Small Giants. I think Berry's in the room as well. They give a lot of thought to storytelling and how it can move people, so worth having a chat there too.
Thank you. And one for, I guess, for the young women in the room, there's been a big social change around media, just on the backing of that question, where a lot of youth are deciding to disengage from all media because they feel down and disempowered and frustrated by the world. What would be your advice to young women coming through who want to learn about the world and understand what's going on, but are feeling like all of the media that's coming through is just compounding them and not telling the stories that they want to hear? Do you have recommendations for places to listen to?
I'll just fess up. I'm an ABC junkie, so I at least do 40 minutes on the app in the morning, and then I'll do 40 minutes on the TV. So it feeds my need, but I don't necessarily advise it for everybody. But I think this is an ongoing issue because it is hard to find stories of hope or stories you can actually relate to increasingly, because there's just pages of terrible things that I have no control over. And I think that's part of it, is this loss of control or impact on these pieces. So, I think it is important, though, to continue part of mainstream media to understand what that narrative is, because you can't change it if you don't understand it.
And maybe I'd add, as a human species, we're a social animal. We place so much value on connection, and anything that we can do to connect that generation and bring them together to be part of something bigger than themselves, to lift above that overwhelm is really powerful in its own right. And I'd suggest that they follow you on social media, Tiani, because you were Young South Australian of the Year just a few years ago, and I know that your following increased there. And surely a lot of people that look at what you've done and made of that moment in time, you've built incredible connections, and that's fueled a whole range of purpose-driven outcomes that I think would inspire a lot of young women. Thank you.
And I'd just add, so true. On top of what Rach just said then around, there are lots of groups and there's lots of incredible youth-led groups that are emerging or have been around in conservation and these spaces. Coexist is one of them, Blue Minds, other groups like that are doing the joint piece of what's happening on socials, but also meeting and having connection as we all require. And so regulating, I think, your intake, we need to know what's going on, but equally really thinking about what algorithm are you forming and thinking about how you connect back in natural spaces with people, I think is really important.
Awesome. Thanks to all of you. We're going to shift gear a little bit. Forecasts show that data centres will use 20% of our water supply by 2035. How do you move from an extractive capital flow when water can't be offset like carbon can? Throw the mics, run.
And again, I could feel like I just keep handballing to other people, but Sue O'Connor, our president who's in the room, has also sat on boards building data centres with AI at the heart of it, and has helped me better understand both the risks and opportunities around that emerging industry, for example. One thing I'm certain of is that if we refrain from engaging with AI, which is almost impossible actually, but if we choose to, we give a competitive edge to those that are pushing systems that are threatening our landscapes, because it is going to be an opportunity for us, but we have to have your eyes wide open with risk as well. And so I think that comes back to, again, chain of custody, understanding the impacts, favouring those that are actually doing the work where they can to mitigate and use the mitigation hierarchy to remove impacts as much as possible. And whether people agree with offsets or not, once you get that chain of custody piece right, rewarding those that are using that system well. But I don't have a better answer than that. It's one that keeps me up for sure.
I'm going to say what she said.
Yes, what Rach said in terms of it's a real space that we need to keep our eye on. I feel like in environmental sector, we need to be watching and figuring out what is happening in AI and all these spaces, just as much as technologists and every other sector is, because our voices and our brains on the development of these things needs to happen as well. I would say that it's a really interesting space with data centres, because what they're powering in terms of AI has the opportunity to help us with this regenerative journey or hinder. And so whether it works on the extractive or the regenerative curve is something that we can help determine. I think that at the moment, some of the data centres, their energy, for instance, is being connected to with renewables. So there's a lot of push around that when you're building data centres. The water piece, there's a lot of innovation happening with oil immersion and other cooling functions, but we need to stay on top of that and taking all the water from certain regional areas, it won't be acceptable. And so we really need to keep on top of what is happening in these spaces. And many companies still want social license to do this. And many of those who are building want social license. And so I say they're very keen to improve how this happens. And AI will probably help them improve it as well. But it's a space that we should all be involved in.
Thank you. I think the three of you sitting up here is an excellent example of staunch leadership, but also collaboration. We have a question about collaboration, about the potential that you see for collaborative regeneration of nature across Naarm or Melbourne. Who's leading and who needs to join forces?
I think, and it goes back to Lisa's concept, we're a system here and we each have our role. And I think it's about being brave and vulnerable enough to say, this is the bit I operate in and I will operate better if I work with these groups. I think here in Naarm, it depends what you're solving for. The system is broad. Are we looking at urban? Are we looking at peri-urban? Are we looking at global or local? And I think it's around working out who's the cohort, working with that system and within your strengths. We're really good at some things. We're good at protection, permanent protection. There's other things we're not good at and we shouldn't be, and that's where you find that space. But it requires a level of vulnerability to say, hey, that's your space, not mine. And I think we've got to get better at that. Part of the complexity here is the funding for this type of work is so thin that we're often competing for the dollars, which leads to this anti-competitive behaviour. And I think we've got to push through, but that's the issue in the unspoken in the room.
And I might just put a call out for trust. I mean, collaboration, when done well, it needs to build trust, not erode trust. And so when you say who's leading, I imagine it's often best started when you've got the shared vision, the shared values, and there's just some ignition of trust early on, and that's when it works best. So it's not easy to say who's leading because there's so much collaboration when we look at Naarm, Melbourne, across sectors, but also within our own sector. I get frustrated sometimes because I hear people say, oh, you guys don't all talk enough, there's not enough collaboration. It's just, as far as I'm concerned, the collaboration is incredibly high across this sector that we are all in. It's why we value mornings like this, and we utilise it to build trust so that we can hopefully bend that curve that you were talking about, Lisa.
Thank you. Now, there's over 500 people in this room and most of them women, but before I go further, shout out to our allies of the non-women in the room, for non-binary people and the men. Thank you for being here and supporting the great work that we do. I think there's often a false narrative when it comes to equity with a belief system that people think that the person who's in the margin needs to drive the margin forward. It requires lots of staunch leaders opening doors and facilitating spaces for us to be able to step up, gifting us opportunities, giving us the microphone. So thank you for allyship and supporting other people. And I guess with this focus being on women in conservation, we can continue to think about the edges and the margins for equity in other groups such as First Nations people, people with disability, as we continue to forge creating a more equitable and diverse workforce system and place. So with that, 500 people in the room, over 500 people, and our online attendees, what is the most important action each of us can do now to foster regenerative transformation?
I'm Lisa first.
You're first.
Oh, those first actions right now. As you saw, I spoke a lot about investing in it, and I would really encourage us to bring nature into financial discussions on the economy, all of us to be thinking about that, whether you're in philanthropy, whether in finance. Actually, it doesn't really matter what role you're playing, but how we need to invest in nature for it to move up that curve and accelerate, as I talked about. And as I said, capital helps curves accelerate, and there's lots of other capital being put into technology spaces and infrastructure spaces and all these sort of things. And so I really encourage that sort of language and us to embrace that and think about how we get everyone investing in nature. And then on top of that, being out inland, on country, in these spaces, and learning a little bit ourselves about what stewardship takes. Like, nature is its own force and we're only part of it. We're not in control. But at the same time, we have caused a lot of the destruction, and so we need to enable this regeneration of it.
Thank you. I'm going to go to one final question, and I think we could use hours of time to yarn, and every one of you should be sitting up here with the mic too. You all have incredible knowledge, expertise, understandings of the field, so I wish that we had more time. But alas, we don't. So my final question is, how do we become the Jennies, the Janes, the Rachels, the Corinnes, the Lisas to make a tangible difference?
Well, that's very kind to even put some of our names amongst that, but in that list. I'm going to just use my last answer to shine the spotlight on the importance of, in these hard times, still finding, prioritising joy and fun and that human connection. I would say that's what we should be focusing on, because I don't see any other way of beating that curve without others outside this room looking in and going, that looks like something I want to be a part of. And I know that I am drawn towards tables, rooms, movements, sectors that value joy and fun. And sometimes it feels like it's not the right moment, and yet I'm going to argue it does need to be prioritised.
I totally agree with you, Rachel. I call it hope. I was born, I think, with the glass half full. So you've also got to be relentless. You just don't ever give up. It's too good to give up. Being in nature, and for me it's being in the ocean. Being in the ocean is the most exciting thing. And for those of you who remember Valerie Taylor, who was this shark-loving scuba diver with a pink wetsuit, she was my hero. And it's part of that. You just follow it and you don't give up. I don't have a pink wetsuit, but I'm out there nearly every weekend.
And you did want to today have us enter stage, but let's hear it for the girls. And I was like, might be a bit too much right now, but
it got canned.
Next year.
I was just going to add and I think you saw a little bit in my story, but there's so many more women and mentors and all sorts of people in the story. And so I think passing that on, I think women are inherently great at supporting those around them. And so I just encourage to be open and joyful and continue to do that for the opportunity that you have for others around you as well.
Beautiful, thank you. Incredibly wise words from some incredibly wise women. Thank you so much for your time.
Not so sure on that bit.
If we can have a huge thank you for Lisa, Corinne and Rachel